Work and in partnership with the Indiana Association of College Admissions Counselors. This is the second year we've had this meeting this way, and I'm sure that you join me in hoping that next year we will actually be face-to-face again. But it's good to be together anyway, and it's good to be with people who we know are advocates for Hoosier students. You are very integral to ensuring that all Hoosiers have access to the opportunities that higher education can provide. Many of you in the audience here today with us represent higher education, but we have others who are coming and joining us from the K-12 space and our community partners and nonprofit organizations who come alongside us to really promote the value of higher education for Hoosiers. So this is a busy time of the year. Thank you for taking time to learn from each other over today and tomorrow and to share the strategies and best practices that you're using to advocate for Indiana's learners. Our theme for this year's conference is career relevance. And for the Commission, this is increasingly important as we see that career relevance is increasingly important for students to apply what they're learning, to connect with employers, and to develop really marketable skills. And we know that it builds value for higher education when students have career relevant experiences. When we talk about what career relevant experiences are, it can be an internship, an apprenticeship, a work-based learning experience, a research project, some sort of student engagement experience that aligns what students are learning with career aspirations. I know we all agree that every student deserves the opportunity to pursue a fulfilling career, and that Indiana graduates should expect that their degrees or their credentials that they earn will help them have meaningful employment, a good job, and career advancement, and actual economic mobility in their lives as well. And career relevant experiences are one of the best ways to set students up for success after graduation and to keep more people in Indiana after they graduate as well. We know from data that Hoosiers who have career relevant experiences in their coursework are more likely to believe that the value of the cost and the time that they engage with higher education was worth it and helped them in their lives and their careers. We also know that our employer community and businesses require top-notch talent, higher skill levels all the time as the economy is changing. They need people who have the technical experience to get the job done, but they also need people who think critically, are collaborative, problem solvers, can communicate, and prospective employees need to be well-rounded and increasingly need to be adaptable as those challenges change for them in their jobs. These traits can and will continue to be developed through some type of formal education beyond high school and in high school, whether that's dual credit in high school or a work-based project in college. And that's going to be sort of the subject of what we talk about today and tomorrow. While the theme of our conference itself is career relevance and changes, our conference tagline remains the same: inform, empower, advance. Let me talk just a few moments about the Commission's strategic plan. I hope many of you are already familiar with it. It was adopted in January of 2020, Reaching Higher in a State of Change. And it really provides the blueprint for us, focused on pathways for student success, from the recent high school graduate to the returning adult, and all focused on our big goal that at least 60% of Hoosiers would have a quality credential beyond high school. As we were designing this strategic plan, we knew we needed what we're calling a new education compact, one that aligns pre-K education, K-12, post-secondary, and continuing education with the workforce needs. One that really blurs the lines between these and provides smooth transitions among all types of learning or training opportunities, and provides more affordable, flexible options, while at the same time never losing sight of the importance of quality and advancing equitable economic opportunity. This is why the Commission made as one of its goals that 100% of our post-secondary programs would require some sort of career-relevant experiences by 2025, which is the same year that we're focused on the 60% goal. Through a collaborative effort between the Commission and Indiana's higher education institutions, the Commission audited all of our state's 2- and 4-year programs and found that nearly 90% of them incorporate some sort of a student engagement experience. 78% of those programs actually require a career relevant experience. Progress has been made, but we will continue to keep a close eye on that percentage with the ultimate goal of having 100% of our degrees and programs having embedded career relevance. There's obviously still work to be done, but one of the reasons why we're grateful to be able to focus on this topic at this conference over the next 2 days. The conversations happening over these 2 days will hopefully inspire all of you to feel like you have new ways to consider building career relevance into your work, whatever the lens of your work might be. As I mentioned, and I know many of you are aware, I've already mentioned the 60% goal. We set that goal in 2008, and Indiana was at 33.4% in 2008. We're now at 48.3%, which is about a 15% gain. I always want to make sure people understand that that 60% goal was picked very strategically to align with the workforce needs. And we know that most jobs that have been created require education and training beyond high school, and that those without some sort of a credential, a certificate, an industry certification, or a degree are at a disadvantage when it comes to competing for available jobs. We also know that increasingly employers need those skill sets in order for them to provide to their employees good jobs as well. So how do we get to the rest of the way to where we need to be to get to the 60% goal? And it really is by adapting to the needs of today's learners. It is increasingly a consumer-driven system of higher education. And it's more critical than ever that we have options for all students, again, from graduating seniors to returning adults. Educators and employers must work together to define the skills needed and provide these kind of options. So let me give a little bit of sobering. The good news is we made a lot of improvement. We made that 15% gain. But at a time when education is more important than ever, we also need to double down to ensure that access to college is available and success for first generation low-income minority students becomes more the norm than the exception. And we have work to do here again. And that's why educational equity must remain a foundational priority in our pursuit to the 60% goal. We can't get there without doing better with those populations of people. When we talk about equity, we say that we acknowledge that life circumstances and obstacles should not dictate the opportunity to succeed. We know, and we've been talking for years about education being the great equalizer, providing opportunity for economic mobility. But we also know that it can be the great divider if we fail to prepare all Hoosier students for this evolving economy. We also are concerned that the value proposition of higher education is questioned at a higher rate. Indiana's college-going rates have declined overall 6 percentage points in the last 5 years to 59%. And that has come primarily with a decrease in young men accessing higher education. If you look at young women graduating from high school, 65% of them are still going on, 51% of men. There are lots of reasons why, and we need to talk about that. We've actually undertaken research to look at Hoosiers' attitudes, especially those who are choosing not to continue higher education, to get a better understanding of why that is. And there are multiple reasons. It became clear that the first reason, and not surprisingly, is that people think higher education is not affordable. And this is in part, there is a real aspect to this, but some of it's perception as well. Financial pressures and labor shortages are exacerbating the trend that was already there for fewer people choosing to join, to go into higher education, but instead join the workforce. That's not bad. We have better paying jobs, but it still will limit economic mobility. While our unemployment rate is only 3.3% now, many of those jobs will still need to have continuing education along the way. And when you look at this issue of affordability, please help us get out the message that Indiana ranks first in the Midwest and fourth in the nation in need-based aid. Between our 21st Century Scholars Program, which I'm going to talk about, our Frankel Bannon scholarships, our Workforce Ready grant, which covers 150 tuition-free certificates, we have a way to tell Hoosiers they can afford higher education. And let me shine a light on, of course, what we think is the premier program in this regard, which is Indiana's 21st Century Scholars Program. This program, I'm sure you know, requires students to apply while they're in 7th or 8th grade, and they offer these income-eligible Hoosiers up to 4 years of paid tuition at an Indiana college or university. Since the creation of the program in 1990, more than 45,000 students have earned a credential or degree through the 21st Century Scholars Program, and over 100,000 are enrolled now between 7th grade sign-up and those who are in college. The Scholars Program has been transformative for Hoosier students, and they're the only group on track to close the achievement gap across all races and ethnicities in Indiana. While it may not be the silver bullet, it's as close as we have to a program that can actually ensure college access and success. And that's why I'm excited to announce the release today, in fact, of our first 21st Century Scholars Report. The report provides an analysis of college enrollment success, completion for all 21st century, and disaggregates our data by race and ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and gender. The report will be released later today. And so please take time to look at that. I think each of you can use the results of that as you continue to promote the Scholars Program. And now I'm pleased to offer some examples of institutions that are using innovative principles and practices and focus on the success of the 21st Century Scholars Program, especially now as we need to make sure that those students who may have lost some of their learning opportunities during COVID, we can double down and regain that loss that was experienced. Every year, we recognize a few institutions who are making a big impact on the students and paving the way for student success. These awards are named after my predecessor at the commission, Stan Jones, who was the commissioner for many years. After Stan left the commission in 2009, he founded and served as president of Complete College America. We first presented these awards in 2017, and Stan was actually with us for that. And we were honored to recognize for the 5th year of these awards to help build upon Stan's legacy of landmark education policy for Indiana and really the nation. Throughout his life, Stan was always focused on increasing college access and completion and was a tireless advocate for student success, particularly for low-income first-generation and minority students. So I'm pleased today to announce the 2021 Stan Jones Student Success Award winners, each of which will receive a portion of the $10,000 available to them, but proposed students because they propose student success programs or initiatives. The first is Indiana University Bloomington, who is implementing the 21st Century Scholars Academic Enhancement and Engagement Initiative. This program is designed to increase engagement and academic focus among scholars. They'll do this through promoting student success among the more than 3,000 21st century scholars, promoting cohort support among STEM majors, and support scholar transitions from virtual to on-campus learning. Congratulations to IU Bloomington. The second is Purdue University West Lafayette's Division of Summer Session, which is focusing on enhancing programming and helping students overcome learning loss caused by COVID-19 instructional changes. The initiative aims to increase the number of students who are prepared for college-level calculus courses. Congratulations to Purdue University West Lafayette. I believe Stan would be very proud of this legacy that he left and of the great work that these and so many others are doing to increase student access, success, retention, and credential attainment across the state. I encourage all of you to tune in later today for the breakout session at 10 o'clock featuring these two institutions, and they'll discuss more about the programs that they are putting in place. With that, I now have the distinct privilege to join me for the next part of our discussion, Jason Bierce. Most of you, I think, are familiar with Jason. He's the Vice President for Education and Workforce Development at the Indiana Chamber of Commerce. Prior to joining the Chamber, he served as Associate Commissioner at the Indiana Commission for Higher Education. In his current role, he certainly continues to work with the Commission and higher education and workforce agencies, employers, and he lobbies for state education and workforce policy while advocating for strengthened college and career readiness for Indiana students. Jason understands very well the role higher education and training play to develop Indiana's needed and skilled workforce. Thank you, Jason, for joining us this morning.
My pleasure to be here. Good to see you, Teresa.
You too. I'd like to ask you to begin by telling us a little bit more about the new Institute for Workforce Excellence, its purpose and its goals.
Sure. Well, I'm happy to do so. Well, first, I'm going to give you a bit of context. I know this won't be a surprise to you, but talent and workforce and the quantity and quality thereof is absolutely the top concern for employers across the state. I know we'll talk more about this later, but we do an annual survey of employers, and a full 85% this year said that meeting their talent needs was their top challenge. So that's one. There's increased demand for highly skilled talent, and the supply of that talent is nowhere close to meeting that demand. Two, and I know you're aware of this through the good work, your partnership with Gallup Strata, is that we found that increasingly individuals are looking to their employers for guidance and nudges on what type of training or credentials to pursue. But the rub there is that many employers don't know how to navigate this ever expanding and complex workforce development landscape. I mean, seemingly on a daily basis, there are new programs and initiatives and opportunities, but for many of our employers, they're either largely unaware of what those opportunities are, or they have challenges navigating it. In much the same way that historically, members of the Indiana Chamber look to us to help them navigate the policy landscape. They don't necessarily have the time, the interest, or the wherewithal to be tracking legislation with the State House in DC and know what's relevant to them or what might affect their businesses. And we've come to find that they have a comparable need on the workforce development space. And so if we think about how employers are well positioned to encourage individuals to make decisions that are in their own individual best interest, but are also going to help the company, bottom line. And that's really what the Institute for Workforce Excellence is really about. It's really kind of three overarching goals. One, and this is the most important, is partnerships, right? How can we use our platform, our network, our relationship to strengthen partnerships across business, community, education, and government? So we've got more employers in particular working actively and collaboratively with education institutions and others to productively co-develop and talent. So that's one. Two, it's programming, which I kind of already talked about, which is how can we do our part to help employers better navigate and connect to programs and partners out there, whether they're from the public sector or the private sector, whether at the state level, the regional level. We know that employers want to connect to potential partners and resources in their own backyard, but often they're either not aware of them or they don't know how to go about it. And the third is around policy and practice, which, as you said, is part of my role. And we're looking at ways that we can build upon what we've been doing in terms of targeted research and surveys of both employers and employees. And we'll talk more about this, I think, later in our discussion. But, for well over a decade now, we've been doing surveys for Indian employers, representative sample, all localities, all industries, et cetera. Now we're in the process of doing that same surveying efforts for employees as well. And the goal with that really is let's spot trends, let's spot opportunities, and most importantly of all, let's feed that information back to various constituencies, including our state partners, including our local partners, including education institutions, so that they can use that information to guide and inform the work that they're doing.
Well, that helps because I think a lot of people still don't know enough about the Institute. And I know I've had an opportunity to learn more about it. And I know how important the work is that you're doing. As in this area of college and career readiness, we know it's top of mind for the Chamber, maybe even some activity in the upcoming legislative session. I would assume that, it's always been important, but and building a little bit more, digging a little deeper on your introductory comments, why do you think this is more important now? Why are college and career readiness discussions more important now than ever before for the Chamber?
Well, yes, and you said during your introductory comments, you mentioned the Commission's strategic plan. Like you, the Chamber has a strategic plan that we call Indiana Vision 2025. It has 4 drivers. The one at the very top is outstanding talent. And despite a lot of important progress and momentum, and we're all well aware that we're not close to meeting our education attainment goals, and that continues to place Indiana at a relative disadvantage to our peer states, and competitors around the world for that matter. And so, what we're really trying to do is reinforce what I know you all on part of this conference are doing this good work every day, which is making that connection between education attainment and economic opportunity. And we know that just there simply aren't enough students in the pipeline right now on the path to post-secondary. And it's part of the reason many students and families don't know what their options are. They don't know how to navigate it. So, for our part, we're constantly looking for policy opportunities, policy barriers, the ways that we can kind of knock things out that might stand in the way. In this upcoming session, a few things that we're going to be focused on. One, we think although some good work's been done in recent years around graduation pathways and high school diplomas, we think there's some opportunities to strengthen those linkages. I know we'll talk more about this later as well. Eliminating barriers to students, particularly in the high school space, engaging in quality work-based learning opportunities. And then we also think that there's opportunity to help address some of the content shortage areas there are in terms of college and career readiness. You used to use this talking point. I don't know if it's still true. I imagine it is that I think in a given year there were 7 high school physics teachers licensed across the state, and if we're trying to provide a robust STEM and other curricula, we just simply don't have enough, qualified teachers to teach those subjects as well. So we're looking for opportunities that we can make it easier for those in the business world to have relevant expertise. They could perhaps supplement that instruction at the local level without forcing them to lose their chosen profession. So sort of like a K-12 adjunct faculty model, which we know has existed in higher ed for a long time. But most of the programs that exist in the K-12 space are more of a transition to teaching model. So you're in effect asking someone to leave their chosen profession and go into teaching, which is great for those that makes sense. But we know that that's not going to work for many, and there's probably an opportunity here for us to make it easier for employers and folks in the business community to come alongside schools to supplement their curriculum, to make sure it's relevant, to make sure it's rigorous, and most importantly, open students up to a broader range of opportunities they might otherwise be aware of. I think it's now my turn to turn the table.
Let me follow up just a little bit first before you pose a question to me. I think another thing that's important is, and I hear some of this happening, which is maybe during the summer months or other times, getting teachers actually to be in places of employment. So they start to have a better understanding of what the ecosystem of the employer looks like as well. And so that when they're advising their students in high school, one of the things that we know is that there still is a lagging narrative about what a lot of these jobs look like. And we're all, people my age, we're fixed on what it looked like, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And we need to make sure that all of us have an understanding of the skills that are needed and the opportunities with some of these employers. So I think, not only getting, as you mentioned, employers into schools, but getting educators into places of employment, I think makes sense as well. And so now,
as you know, I don't know if others know on this call, a couple of years ago, there actually was a policy change that came about from the governor's workforce cabinet that would have made a portion of the professional development points that teachers have to earn to renew their licenses. One additional option would be sort of an internship type experience at a place of business. Unfortunately, I think that policy was widely misunderstood and misconstrued, and it kind of went away very shortly. But I think your point is absolutely right, which is whether it's a policy direction or just an awareness campaign, I think there's a lot of opportunity for those who are teaching our students to be connected to employers and help inform and make their instruction more relevant and rigorous to how the world is changing so rapidly. So now it's my turn. So let's talk about from your perspective, how do career relevant experiences benefit students?
Well, I think there are multiple ways. First of all, I made mention earlier about this increasing question about the value proposition of higher education, and that for many people, I think there seems to be a disconnect between, they don't see the relevance of what they're learning to what their career aspirations might be. And so one, I think early, it allows students to explore the options that are out there with jobs. Back to what I was saying earlier, what do these jobs really look like? And could this be a good fit for me? And that starts early, I think. And then as students get older, we sort of narrow the funnel so that it looks more like it aligns with what their aspirations are and what the needs of the economy are. So I think it's very important that they see the relevance of what they are learning. We also know that they are much more likely to believe that the cost and the time that they spent in higher education was worth it. The 2019 Strata-Gallup survey that you referenced earlier showed that when there is job relevance in their coursework, they're more likely to agree that the value of their degree, 82% agreed or strongly agreed that the cost of their degree was worth it. And they also believe that their degree helped their careers if it had career relevant embedded experiences. So I think that there are lots of reasons why. We also believe that if there is if they have career relevant experiences, they're more likely to persist when they're in college. They're more likely to graduate from college. Sometimes what you learn from a career relevant experience is what you are not well suited to do. And if you find that out earlier rather than later, the old story, if you don't like blood, you probably shouldn't be a nurse. If you don't like kids, you probably shouldn't be a teacher. And there are all kinds of stories like that. And we may think we know that, but until we actually have a chance to experience it, we may not know for certain that that's not a right fit for us. More times than not, it actually refines what a right fit is and gives them an opportunity. Gives them a great opportunity when they go to get a job. We know that employers often hire the people who they've had an experience with. They've had an internship with them. Indiana is an importer of students. People come to Indiana to go to our colleges and universities. One of the great ways to keep them here is if they've been engaged with an employer during the time that they're here. So there are a host of reasons why, from those work-based experiences in high school all the way through to when we get adults to come back and be reskilled, that this engagement between employers and educators and students is increasingly important. I think we probably always did that at some level, but not like we are talking about now. I think this alignment between employers and educators is, I think it's the right thing to do, but it is mutually beneficial. Employers, and you can speak to this better than I can, but there's no way they can survive in the 21st century without having employees that have higher level skills, the jobs that they need, and adults who are willing to be reskilled after they're there when those job requirements change. Likewise, I think educators are increasingly looking at the changes in the economy and refining their curriculum, whether it's in higher education or even those who are preparing students to go into higher education. So, it's many reasons, and we can't walk away from this call for career relevance without paying for it down the road.
Couldn't agree more.
So let's shift a little bit to talk about the employer survey. I know you have done the employer survey for several years, I think 14 years or so, and then this year you actually added an employee survey as well. Could you share with those who are participating today the results of these surveys, as it might be important to the work that they do?
Happy to do so. Starting with the employer survey, which, as I said, we've done for over a decade now. We poll about 1,000 employers on an annual basis, all industries, all localities. So really, and these are largely either CEOs, senior management, HR directors. So by and large, people that understand their companies, they're running their companies, and kind of give us a good kind of pulse on where the employer community's perspective is on various issues. So starting with good news, like everyone else, Indiana businesses were hit hard by the last 18 months, the pandemic, disruptions, et cetera. And, we're grappling with layoffs and pullbacks and all sorts of, shortage and pipeline issues. But the good news now is that the majority of employers in Indiana are expecting to grow the size of their workforce over the next couple of years. And to your point, more also recognize that they have to do more to upskill and reskill their employees. We're seeing across the board increases over the past 2 to 3 years in terms of employers investing time and money and other resources in training their existing employees. At the other end of the pipeline, we're also seeing some really encouraging momentum in more employers recognizing the value of various forms of work-based learning. Of course, the traditional college internships at the top of the list. I think for many employers, that's their association of work-based learning. But we're seeing increased interest and engagement around high school experiences, apprenticeship experiences, job shadowing, kind of the full spectrum. And as I've shared with you in the past, my most encouraging takeaway on the work-based learning front is that we're seeing significant decrease in the number of employers who aren't doing anything on that continuum. So that's the good news. The not so good news for folks in this call is that relatively few employers in Indiana provide that career awareness, exploration type opportunities that we know at the the K-12 level, which we know are so important to kind of broadening students' horizons about what the opportunities out there and how those opportunities might be different than they or their parents think. We talk about manufacturing. There's still misconceptions that we're talking about dirty, dangerous jobs, when we know that modern advanced manufacturing looks very different than that. Same in the IT space, even though that's the growing industry, that a lot of students think that if you go into IT, your job is a computer programmer, and we know there's all sorts of positions that kind of orbit around that, from marketers and managers, et cetera. And so we really think that we've only got about a third of employers in Indiana that by their own estimate are engaged in that, and we really need to do more to get the word out in terms of if you want to have a pipeline of employees, you got to start much earlier and be much more active and aggressive in making sure that students know what those opportunities are and have a sense about what that path is to make good on that promise. The other thing that we're seeing is, not so good news is, and I believe this is changing, but the numbers don't yet bear that out, is that the majority of employers aren't offering any kind of formalized career coaching to their existing employees as well as part of their HR duties. And so we see there's real opportunity on both ends of the spectrum, connecting with prospective employees way early in their education development and doing more to come alongside their existing employees to make sure that they understand what the resources the employer has available for them to upskill and reskill, and that they understand that the employer wants to be a productive part of that equation, which we've seen in any number of areas, that if the employer is like a part of that equation in a productive, engaged way, the outcomes of the individual are much more likely to be positive, whether that's be in terms of upskilling, reskilling, whether that's seeking help for substance abuse or mental health issues. The list goes on and on. If the employee feels that the employer cares about them, is investing in them, and wants to help them develop and grow, they're much more likely to seek those opportunities, and they're much more likely to take advantage of those opportunities. So that's the employer side. And as you said, for the first time this fall, we did a companion employee survey. Takeaways from that, and I should say, it include kind of the full gambit from employed, unemployed, underemployed. We kind of parse that data and see where there are similarities and differences between those different populations. I think the first big takeaway, or headline, which won't be a surprise to those of you who are joining the conversation this morning, is that the Great Resignation, or I've heard some call it the Great Reshuffling, it's real and it's widespread. We found that the majority of employees in Indiana feel pretty secure about their current jobs, but that doesn't mean they're satisfied with the job that they have. About half our respondents said that they plan to search for new job opportunities in the next year. And about 1 in 4 of those who feel secure in their current jobs still expect to explore their options. And other good news that I know is important to you in this group is that the majority of those who we polled say they're considering additional education and training. The caveat there, though, is that sentiment is strongest and most widespread among those who already have education and training beyond high school, which is maybe not surprising, but it kind of speaks to the larger challenge we have. Those who've had the benefit and the experience of post-secondary education, they know the value that's going to have for their ongoing development. Those who haven't had those opportunities are the less likely to seek it. They're the less likely to understand the advantages of it, and they're the least likely to know about how going about attaining it or affording it. And that kind of leads to the bad news, which is despite a lot of great work by a lot of different constituencies, nearly a third of the Hoosiers that we polled still think that a high school diploma is all they need to have a thriving career in Indiana. But the data is a little bit, there's some disconnects there, because although a third of those who we polled said that a high school diploma was enough, 8 in 10 recognized that they probably will need a college degree if they want to move up in their career. So there's some interesting things happening there. I think the key takeaways for me, which I know that this commission and others in this call are already recognized, is really twofold. We have a messaging challenge when it comes to redefining what we mean by college and making sure that people understand that that's a really broad continuum that includes 2 and 4 year degrees, but there's a lot more on that menu beyond that, and really helping reinforce that value proposition, which I know is something that the commission's actively working on with your partners. On the other side, and I mentioned this earlier, that the Gallup Strata data found this, our survey data confirmed it, which is the vast majority, 80% of employees would consider more training if their employer encouraged it. But as I said earlier, we know we don't have enough employers that are sending that signal in a strong way. And we know that there are too many employees who don't even know what their employer currently offers in that regard. So that's something that we're trying to take on at our chamber in partnership with other business associations in the state, is really kind of help employers see the role that they can play in upskilling and reskilling their talent, and help them understand what a key driver and influencer they are in terms of sending the right message to their current employees, prospective employees, those who are in the pipeline, about the choices they make and the opportunities that's going to provide for them.
So before we go to the next question, I noticed that there's a question that's come in the chat from Michelle Ashcraft, who's the director of the Purdue Promise program. And both of us may want to try to weigh in on this, but she asked the question, as we grapple with the Great Resignation, which you mentioned, and challenges regarding what is generally considered low pay in K-12 and higher education, what can we do as a state to advocate for and take action on higher wages for educators at all levels across the state, and advocate and take action on for paid career engagement opportunities for students. So I think we have a couple of topics there. One, I know the legislature and the pay commission for K-12 has been working on elevating the pay for K-12 teachers. And the other one that we may want to weigh in that's specifically about the topic today is, how we improve how we actually look at the issue of paid, I guess maybe it's paid internships and paid opportunities. So maybe we could talk a little bit about the EARN program while we're on this topic. I'm not sure that's exactly what Michelle was getting to, but it gives us an opportunity to shine a light on that. And this is clearly a partnership between the commission and the chamber. Would you like to make a few comments about that?
Sure. And, just the outset, 100% agree with Michelle that we need the vast majority, if not all, work-based learning opportunities to be paid, because we know that for a low-income student, taking an unpaid internship is just not an option. And if it's choice between paid work that doesn't align with their career aspirations or goals, or unpaid work that does, most times that individual is going to take the paid work. And so that's something that we're really pushing our employers, particularly in the private sector, to make sure that that they're thinking about how they provide those opportunities for all students, regardless of their income, which, as you said, leads into EARN. I assume most folks on this call are part of this conference are aware of EARN Indiana, the EARN Indiana program, but if you're not, just give you a quick summation. EARN is the state's work study program that has clear guidelines for individuals, employers, in terms of it being a high quality experience, and for employers that hire a low income student and meet those parameters, that the work that they're doing is largely aligned with their program of study or their career goals. The state, in effect, subsidizes 50% of those wages. So it gives an incentive for employers to hire an individual that they might otherwise overlook. That program has been very successful under the commission's leadership since 2013, and we work in partnership at the chamber with the commission to try and connect as many employers and students to those opportunities. More recently, though, we, among others, sought a legislative change that would expand that program to include not just current college students, but current high school students as well. And for all the reasons we've been talking about, that unfortunately, some of the trends aren't moving in the right direction. We're seeing declines in college enrollment, et cetera. In part, people aren't necessarily making that connection between the paid work that they want to do and the education and training that goes along with it. So we see this EARN expansion is a real opportunity to engage with students earlier and give them paid work experiences that align to what they might want to do, or if nothing else, to your earlier point, Teresa, find out things that they don't want to do, which is not a bad thing either. We timed this in a way that, as I said, this change actually happened in 2019. It takes effect for the graduating class of 2023, which not coincidentally is the same time period this year's juniors that will be expected to meet the new graduation pathways requirements, which include a strong work-based learning component. And so, we think that the timing here is right. The sense of urgency is right. To your point, more educated employers are trying to think about ways that they can, connect, and, as Secretary Jenner says, blur the lines between education and employment. And we think that, this EARN expansion could go a long way towards providing paid opportunities for students earlier in their education career that's going to help them kind of find that path, and it's going to give employers an added incentive to engage in this type of opportunity well sooner than maybe some thought was feasible, appropriate, or doable. So we think this could be a real opportunity to dramatically increase the amount of relevant, high quality, and paid work-based learning opportunities available to Hoosier students. Do you want to take the other one, the teacher side, or ask me more questions?
That's good. While we're on the topic of, paid internships and looking at just costs generally, a question came in about, in the context of both equity and affordability, again, the 21st Century Scholars Program. I wanted to make a couple comments about this, talking about, is there a way to simplify the process and how we get more people to sign up? And there's great information that's going to come out from the Scholars Report today. One of the sobering data points is that of those who actually are income eligible, only about 26% of them are signing up for the scholarship. And this, we really, again, I called on you for helping us in other areas. We really need your help in this regard. And this extends clearly families, schools, those leaders in schools, letting people know about it. But we need employers to actually tell their employees about the program. We need the help of community leaders, churches, all kinds of folks to make sure that this really great opportunity. When I talked about the college going rate overall declining to 59%, for those scholars who meet the eligibility requirements when they graduate, 88% of them are going on and accessing higher education. So we need to make sure that the process itself is not what's standing in the way, and we'll continue to look at that. We know that there are challenges associated with the complexity of Pell, and sometimes people think that the Pell complexity is also the 21st century complexity, and they are different, although we're not saying that there aren't ways that we can make sure it's as easy as possible for people to sign up. What you don't want is people to sign up for the program and then all of a sudden when they graduate, they didn't really realize that they were even signed up for it. And that's why we put in place the Scholar Success Program with very specific requirements for scholars when they're in high school, knowing that that's what's really contributing to their success after high school. So I will take that question to heart. We'll look again, see if there's anything we can do while still we have to know that they're income eligible, but let's look at the process again.
Well, Teresa, if I could add one thing that I know you're aware of, but others in this meeting might not be, as it happens just today, the Department of Education is taking a proposal to the State Board of Education for a new accountability dashboard for the state of Indiana. And encouragingly, they've included scholar enrollment as one of what they call a headline indicator at the middle school level. So I think that's going to really raise the visibility and quite frankly, some scrutiny around the schools that are doing a good job and making sure they're connecting students to opportunity and those who've got room for improvement. We continue to advocate if they're going to have that metric at the middle school level, that they should have the completion and earning the scholarship at the high school level. And but if nothing else, I think it's a really encouraging step that the State Board of Education and more educators in the K-12 space are seeing this as important a lever as their traditional metrics around test scores and graduation rates. So just wanted to share a bit of good news for those who are rightly concerned about the number of students who aren't getting connected to those opportunities currently.
And a great example of what we referred to earlier of the blurring of the lines between K-12 and higher education. I think the Scholars Program is a perfect example of that. It's an aspiration preparation program that then provides the scholarship for students to access and succeed in college. And, we all accept now that these need to be soft handoffs between K-12 and higher education, between higher education and the workforce. So I think that the work that the state board is going to consider is actually very much in keeping with that. I think I saw Liz from our office coming on the screen to perhaps ask another question.
Yes, Teresa, good morning. I'm just looking through the chat, making sure we address everybody's comments and questions. I'm hoping, Teresa and Jason jump in too, that you can talk a little bit about this conversation we continue to have at the commission about affordability. Brenda brought up that, the talk around the table at their home and around their family is that, college is going to give you debt. It's not worth the cost. I know that this is a topic that's really important to the commission right now and many others. So I was hoping you could take a few minutes to talk about that.
Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about it because I think we have a good message to deliver. First, let me say affordability is rightfully a concern. And I'm not going to say that people shouldn't be concerned about debt. I mean, there is wise borrowing and there is unwise borrowing. And one of the things that we've tried to do is be really transparent about costs and borrowing and the payoff for that. One of the things we've done working in tandem with our colleges and universities is there is now a requirement that there be a debt letter that goes out from the colleges to students who are borrowing to show what you will owe on a monthly basis. So that's sort of the debt part of it. We hear the stories all of the time, and I'm sure that it's more than an anecdote, but it is not the rule. When you hear a story about somebody graduating with $200,000 of debt, that is not the case for most people. We've actually reduced the cost of tuition in Indiana in terms of increases. We've seen the lowest increases in 30 years, usually holding tuition to flat or no higher than an inflationary index. So I think we have to be very focused on the tuition and the cost. And then the other side of this, of course, is that the state has continued to invest through financial aid. So getting the message out that you can have 4 years if you're income eligible for the 21st Century Scholars, that if you have zero EFC, even if you're not a 21st Century Scholar, the Frank O'Bannon Scholarship to both public and private institutions provides generous financial aid as well. And then, of course, if you are an adult and you want to get one of those valuable industry certification of some sort or a certificate, we're paying for those as well. And then on top of that, many of our institutions will bridge the gap between what the state is offering or what you might get with Pell and what it might cost at an institution to cover other costs. Again, I'm not going to in any way diminish the seriousness of the especially COVID-related costs that came up for people, families who are taking care of their kids, and all of the other associated kinds of concerns that people have when they're thinking about the cost of college. But compared to many of our neighbor states, we have a good story to tell about tuition, about financial aid, and about opportunities that the institutions are providing to cover other costs. So this is a group of people who are participating in this conversation today who can help us get that message out. If people think it's not for them because it's not affordable, let's turn that story around and have a different narrative.
Well, the only thing I would add is one to validate what the premise of the question, which is we heard it in our new employee surveys that among those who are considering education, the expense or the perceived expense is the number one barrier that's presenting them from following through on that. And of course, as Teresa rightly pointed out, there's a disconnect there because we've historically been one of the most generous states in terms of state financial aid. Although most that's been, focused on those who need it most, rightly low-income students. But now with the Next Level Jobs program, the Workforce Ready Grant, at a minimum, we're offering pretty much every Hoosier in the state of Indiana, a short-term certificate that they can take directly in the workforce, or they can use to stack towards, a higher level degree. And there's, despite a lot of great work, by the commission and its partners, we're trying to do our part at the chamber. Not enough individuals know about those opportunities, and not enough employers know about those opportunities. And so, to your point, Teresa, we just got to really keep driving that message in every opportunity, because it's a real shame that people believe there isn't opportunity and options for them when there is a whole bevy of options. And so we just got to collectively do our part to help them connect those dots.
Well, and the other thing, we should also mention the 529 plans that in how we actually encourage families early, and grandparents and others to start early. Not only are you starting to financially prepare for it, but you're starting from a standpoint of thinking about college being in your future. Once you've invested it all at an early age, then it seems like college is, again, broadly interpreted, college is a pathway for you. Any other questions, Liz, or should we'll go back to our agenda? I'm happy to stick with questions if there are questions.
I know you've got some good prepared questions to still address with you and Jason. So I jump on that, and I'll keep watching the chat to see if we've got anything else to bring up.
Well, actually, we're happy to answer questions at any time, but I think we wanted to talk a little bit about, Jason, if you would actually talk a little bit about this perception of those who are under 18 not being able to have some of these experiences, and it might be helpful to, address what I think may be a misconception.
Yeah, I mean, if I would categorize it, there are probably three reasons: maturity or perceptions, maturity, ability, and liability. I think there's general assumption, perhaps particularly for those of us who have children, that somebody under 18 is just not going to have the maturity or the knowledge, the ability to come in and actually be a contributing member of the workplace, which we know by and large is not true. If students are given those opportunities, if they're held to the same expectation as an older student or employee, they're, for the most part, in most cases, they're going to rise to the occasion. The liability one is the other, though, that is, again, more of a perception challenge than a real challenge. I think there's concerns among employers that they're taking on additional risk if they're asking a student under 18 to do something that somebody over 18 might do. Of course, those of you might know that if you look at like the U.S. Department of Labor regulations, there are very few jobs that a 17-year-old is prohibited doing than an 18 and older. I mean, it's like running a meat slicer and a couple other jobs like that. But for the most part, if somebody is motivated and given the opportunity, a younger student, then they have just as much ability to do those jobs as somebody who's older. And so we're trying to attack that in two ways. One we already talked about, which is the earn expansion. Giving a financial incentive for employers to engage early and give them a reason to maybe overcome these misconceptions about what a 16 or 17-year-old can do versus an older student. And then I think I may have mentioned at the outset of this call, we're also working in collaboration with some lawmakers in the General Assembly this session to look at some policy directions that might provide additional avenues to take that liability concern off the table. I mean, at the end of the day, somebody, either the school district or the employer or some, deputized intermediate organization is going to have to take on that liability. And we want to make sure employers understand that liability concern or those worker compensation concerns shouldn't be the deciding factor in whether they engage earlier with students and whether they provide those opportunities. And so we're hopeful that we'll have a policy victory to go along with kind of the ongoing messaging war to help employers make this connection between engaging with talent sooner and being able to meet their talent pipeline needs.
I want to pick up on one comment or question that came in, and then I want to shift to another final topic because I think we're running out of time here. But just to put it on your list there, Jason, one of the folks said that while they really like the idea of teachers getting into places of employment, that the summer months might not be the best way to do it, that they're engaged in other activities. So as you work through the Institute and others, you might consider this of how are there ongoing ways to engage with educators as opposed to just standalone opportunities in the summer. So,
well, and I think that's 100% right. It's also true for students. Many people, particularly those who haven't had these opportunities historically, when they think of a work-based learning opportunity, they think about it in the summer months, right? And if we're actually going to do this at scale and provide these opportunities for all students, like that activity can't just take place during the summer. It needs to be year-round. It needs to be project-based, hybrid experiences, et cetera. So whether it be on the educator side or the individual student side, I think there's a lot of work we can do to kind of increase capacity around those opportunities and make sure it's flexible to kind of meet people where they're at.
So as we kind of conclude, I wanted to hit on one other topic that we've talked about with the work that we're doing in terms of building the value proposition. And one of the things that we've learned is that for many people, we don't have the right messengers, whether it's for the 21st Century Scholars Program or it's for work-based learning or if it's for, engaging in college. They don't necessarily trust the messages that are coming to them. And one of the places that we know that they do actually listen to would be places of employment and employers. So whether that's people coming back through tuition reimbursement programs or them telling if you have your employees giving the message about the 21st Century Scholars, whether it's working with others who are messengers. I guess I would like to sort of conclude by having you speak a little bit to the role of employers as messengers for this bigger topic about the value of higher education.
No, I think you're right. And this is, in large part what's driving, us setting up this umbrella initiative that we call the Institute for Workforce Excellence, which is, it turns out employers are very well positioned as a credible messenger to individuals. As it turns out, they're also well positioned to be a credible messenger to their peers. Employers listen to employers, and the more employers that we can hold up as kind of modeling the right behaviors, showing them it's possible. I've used it as an example countless times, but I think it's worth repeating. Cook Group has gotten a lot of well-deserved attention for their My Cook pathways, but I think there are a lot of companies that believe that because they don't have the size and resources of a big company like Cook Group, they can't do what Cook Group is doing. And as it turns out, and Cook will be the first to acknowledge this, they're not doing it alone. They're partnering locally with their Ivy Tech campus. They're leveraging the state's next level jobs program. They're working with Goodwill Industries, et cetera. So they're packaging it and they're being the messenger, but the way they're actually making it work is by connecting to what's already there and sequencing that in a meaningful and productive way. And we think that type of approach is a really replicable playbook, particularly for small and mid-sized businesses that just don't have those resources. They just don't have the staff. They don't have the brand recognition to compete for talent the same way. So we're really trying to come alongside our members and help them understand how important they are as messengers in driving the right kinds of behavior that ultimately is going to make it easier for them to source, cultivate, and retain the talent that they need.
Well, thank you so much. I think this has been a rich discussion. We have a lot of other questions that we haven't had a chance to get to, questions about online instruction and how it plays into this whole thing, questions related to COVID, a specific question to you about the humanities, arts, and social sciences and how they are playing into the work, your talk with your companies. So we'll certainly look at these questions, even though we don't have a chance to answer them right now, and share them with the ones that are especially about you, Jason, or to you. We'll share those with you as well. So
yeah, I want to real people are saying about me.
About you, yes. So thank you, and thanks to the work that the Chamber is doing to really step up and be engaged in this education workforce space. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Liz, to provide some instructions for the next part of our program.
Thank you, Teresa. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today. And for the next 2 days, really, we have a great program planned for you. Over 40 sessions between keynotes and lunch and learn, networking, and breakout sessions. We have some wonderful topics for you. You can actually filter through those breakout sessions with the filter option. We've package those into tracks for you. So if you're looking for things that are really about data, you can filter by data, you can filter by student success and the talent pipeline, all of those things. So really tried to organize that for you well this year. And all you have to do is really just navigate away from this session and go to schedule and pick the next one you'd like to visit. We have 4 or 5 sessions for you starting at 10 a.m. So with that, I think we can close out. But thank you again for joining us, Jason, for being with us this morning. Always good to see you. And we'll move on with our program. Thank you so much.